and perhaps I could ask you to perhaps introduce yourselves to this session today and perhaps set the expectation. So I'm going to pass over to Karlie first of all. Karlie, thank you very much for being a host today. Perhaps you could introduce yourselves and set the expectation today, please.
Yeah, that would be great. And it's fantastic to be here with everyone today. Great to see you, and great to see so many cameras on as well. It's nice to see people's faces when we're doing these webinars. So I'm Karlie O'Hara. I'm director of Create LX. We work with organizations, entrepreneurs, coaches to develop online and blended learning journeys. My background is I've been 15 years in business education. I work for Imperial College Business School. So I spearheaded our global online MBA, our blended weekend executive MBA. I was also previously head of learning design and evaluation and an associate director for our EdTech lab there. I'm also a coach. I've got a particular interest in leadership and development as well. So that's my background and my hope for the session today. I've had lots of experiences working with different organisations on their blended programs. So to share some of the experiences that I've had with those.
Thank you, Karlie, for that, and a lot shorter introduction than mine, so I do appreciate that. So I would like to pass over to your co-host today, which is Jan. So Jan, over to yourself, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Paul. Indeed, working in training, e-learning and learning technologies for, I'd say all my life, but that's I'm too old for that. The idea behind Inmisceo, our business, is that we want to help training providers make more training impact. And impact quite often then translates into creating blended learning. And that's exactly the topic of today, of course. We're talking about creating and designing, I should say the other way around, designing and creating your blended courses.
Can I ask what you mean by blended, just before we go through this session a little bit deeper, Jan?
Excellent. Yes, that indeed came up as one of the big. We commissioned University of Oxford as a group. Then they came back. Well, actually, what is blended learning, and what is your definition? Because we found about 50 definitions. So what we define as blended learning is an online self-paced learning element together with a instructor-led element, and it has to be a designed course in that sense. So just taking some e-learning and then talking to it, that's not a designed blended course. There's a bit more to it to make it really impactful. It's still a fairly broad definition as we use it. However, we work in so many industries, it has to be applicable to a lot of different topics, industries, as well. So that is the definition that we have. A bit of self-paced online learning and an element of instructor-led, whether that is through Zoom like this, or as virtual ILT, or in a classroom. That is actually up to the course designer as well.
Thank you very much, Jan. And yeah, we are an industry of acronyms as well, and I believe it's best to talk in plain English.
In that case, virtual ILT is indeed virtual instructor-led training, or in other words, Teams, Zoom sessions, really.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just see you're starting to share the results come through as well. So Karlie, obviously you just see the poll come through. Is that what you expected? Or hoping for?
Yeah, that's great. Everyone's well, there's a small percentage with none, but most people have had some experience. So yeah.
The thing that I find though sometimes is, what is that experience? And sometimes it's good experience and also not so good experience. So I always find that actually is a challenge, as much as, you know, when people have an experience of like e-learning, and it's all about the design, and it's all of what's built into the design, how engaged, how motivated you are as well, to actually go through that. Yeah, no, I will let you guys actually take it through. Jana, have we got any aids? I believe that we were looking at the actual blended template as well to aid some of these conversations. So now we've got the feel for who the target audience is. Perhaps you could, like I say, share the template, and perhaps we can talk to that as we go through. I will now be quiet as much as possible, but please, I want to interject, so that will be with your questions that you put in the chat. So more chat questions, then I can interrupt the flow and see if I can put Jan or Karlie off a little bit as they try and present in the next 30 minutes left for this session. So thank you very much for all questions.
Excellent, thank you. Actually, that's a great introduction, and it also shows that the audience here today is very hopefully gets a lot of relevance out of this this conversation. Let's split this up in two ways. Can everybody see the word blended templates on the screens? That just checking that I'm sharing the right screen. So what this document, and by the way, one of the things that you will receive at the end of this is the link to download this document yourself. So that's our first present to you. We created this document with Karlie and to give people a good idea of how to create your own blended courses. Now, it's two parts. It's designing and it's creating. So let's first talk about designing in this this webinar. Karlie, is there a particular process that you recommend by creating the designing blended courses?
So, so I suppose within this document, there's actually some blended building blocks that you'll get it as a download that you can take away and see. But how I always start the process is by focusing on the outcomes of any piece of training program that there's a design for. Is thinking about the outcomes, and how I like to start is through empathy mapping, by putting myself in the learner's shoes and also in the organisation and thinking about what success would look like. So I think if you go a couple previous with
up, you mean?
Yeah, with the kind of just with the outcomes would be the first stage to think about. Yeah, here. So what the aim of the course is, what people will go away equipped with, what kinds of skills and behaviour will be developed, and also thinking about the feelings and how people will be motivated. And I think something that can often go, it's important to think about measures of success from the beginning, and when you're introducing a blend, how that will also be received within the organisation, and thinking about the parity between online and maybe instructor-led, and giving equal parity to those, so that one's not seen as a substandard element of the learning journey is also an important step.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean, Karlie, that if you talk about the parity between online and instructor-led, is that also dependent on the topic that you might train, the behavioral change or more informative? For example, I can imagine that something that's very skillful, you need more instructor-led, and maybe if there's more knowledge required, it's more online. Does that work that way?
Yeah, potentially. And I think it can also depend on the actual subject matter, the subject type, thinking about what lends itself to what environment. Also, what tools do you have available in the online platform that you have? There's a big variety there in terms of tools that you have access to, and often a platform can really lend itself towards different types of activities. So making the most of the technologies and the platforms that you've got, and then using those live interactions in an impactful way, and thinking about how your kind of online experience can help to scaffold so that when you have time together, you can use that in the most impactful way as well.
Okay, good, thank you. With regards to process that people follow to design a blended course, I believe you use a particular process. Is that something that you can shine a little bit more light on for everybody?
Yeah, so I use my own, well, I call it a create 6-step process, which I suppose you haven't got access to, but you can find on my website, which goes through steps gaining clarity on the value proposition, which is the C, the realization step, which is creating then a high level kind of template of the design. And then the next stage, the E, is engaging. So working with the various partners that you need to, if you're creating videos and scripting those, then actualize and, going ahead and building the materials. And then finally, there's a testing aspect of testing things out. I always think that pilots, if you can do those before a big launch, then that's a fantastic idea, to test things out kind of lower stakes before bigger rollouts. And then importantly, evaluation. So making sure that you build in the evaluation and you're always looping back.
Okay. If you work with organizations or maybe individual trainers, what do people usually find is the more challenging part of designing a course? Do you see a common denominator among all customers, or what's your experience there?
I think sometimes it can be comfort with the technical aspect and the technical skills. So if somebody hasn't had exposure to that, then that can be kind of the getting up to speed with that. That's where I can sometimes see that. Also, maybe just best practices in terms of a learning design model and approach. So, I think providing support there is important.
Jan, could I ask a favour? With the presentation, there was a slide that talks about relevancy. That were really good. I appreciate we got just your contact details, but what I liked about was some of the practical steps
here
in this template. Yeah.
So this one here.
Yeah, and then I think it was then how you progress that forward, because my experience sometimes is that everyone wants to jump into creating the content, and then it's like, I've got this new toy that I want to play with, and it's got all the bells and the whistles and everything like that. But what I find is that there's not the link between what is the job specification of the person I'm trying to train. So what's the learning objectives and everything like that. So when you're looking at the skills development of that individual, this is one of the critical things at times that doesn't always come through in the training. I don't know if you've had that experience, but that's why I liked when I saw this presentation for the first time this week, and the thing that really come through to me was the skills development and the relationship between the relevancy as well. So I don't know if there's some points that you can talk about. I mean, I appreciate, you're talking about the impactful courses and everything like that, but we also have bad behaviors, and I'm sure you've seen that before, and I've walked into it before as well. And so I think if there's anything to take away, think about the skills development and the relevancy for that. And you made the point at the beginning of this about empathy as well. So I'm going to shut up now, but I wonder if you could just talk to those points, because I find this is a really important part of any approach to creating what does good look like. Yeah,
I'd say that the relevance is critical, really. When trying to build any skill, you want to make sure it's relevant to the learner. The three things that are in there are real life examples, resources, and revisiting the outcomes. So I'd say for real life examples, that not only comes from an instructor putting those in, but drawing those out from the learners. So making sure that it's collaborative, that it's two-way learning. It's not, this is what we're teaching you. It's what does the learner actually want to get out of it themselves, and the revisiting outcomes throughout that. You've got the loop, so they can link their own personal goals with the training goals. And in terms of resources, I'd say, providing useful resources, but also making sure that the learner has the resources available to them to be able to take the course, the time available to them. And I suppose that also links into the question that you had around culture. Because I think, so the question was, it was around blended, kind of how can that help shape a culture.
Yeah, and then that links quite nicely into the question that Hannah posed, which was talking about the balance. And I appreciate you mentioned the word hybrid in the structure, but I would say more the blended structure with access to different technologies. But I would also add in a little bit more, Hannah, to talk about it was about the different technologies and the different techniques. Part of that as well, but also the link to the real life examples. The fact is, it's about, from my perspective and my experiences, it's talking about the communications and the collaboration that happens with the actual learning, so which basically reflects your real life examples, and having a safe environment that is, do you know what, it's really good to get things wrong, because this is the best place to do it. Whereas, you know, when you're in real life examples type of thing, then that there's a consequence for that. But in the training and the learning, this is the best place to have reflective learning in a safe way, that you can actually reach out to your peers or reach out to the experts in what I would say is very much more of a blended structure rather than a hybrid structure. What's your views around, you know, the referencing to, because I don't want to get wrapped around what's hybrid, what's blended, but I think if you can really bring forward the essences, the ingredients that actually makes skills development and relevancy, and those examples to really bring it to life for people in learning, you know, in this sort of structure, could you perhaps articulate that a little bit better for me?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I've seen happen sometimes, where you have e-learning and then a live session that isn't connected, you know, I suppose with e-learning, you can reach a wider audience, and you can get that out to, say, even the whole organization, but how relevant is that to the participants? Sometimes, so you might have something that is designed to go out as part of an induction, or as an onboarding process, but maybe the person won't use it until later on, further down their career. So thinking from the initial planning of a course, when will those skills be used? So then you can also think about the motivation and how motivated someone will be. You know, if you've got a mandatory course that you're doing, and you're not feeling that motivated to do it because it's mandatory, and you know you've got all of these other things on your plate, you're not going to be as motivated as you're somebody who needs this particular skill. You can see applications where you'll be using it, and therefore there's an opportunity for you to take this course where you can develop this skill, even doing things like where people sign up to take the courses rather than it being a mandatory training. So I think it's also thinking about the positioning of a course and how that is done within the culture of the organisation.
And just listening to you, I had a point. I had a meeting a little while ago, and they said, "Do you know what, Paul? We have a pool of instructors, and we've moved the dial a little bit more onto the online and a bit of e-learning, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But we have this valuable resource that we don't want to lose, which is our instructors, and that's really our identity." And I said, but that's perfect for like more of a blended approach, because as you and I are talking now, you know, we're learning, we're sharing. You could be my mentor, basically, how to do a good presentation, run to time, perhaps. But what I'm seeing is that there's a concern about everything is just a technology answer to a problem when it's not. Technology is an enabler. It gives you scalability, but and it can give you reach. But really, the fundamentals around a good design is that basically you can set the prerequisite with, you know, assessment. You can do some survey. You can give some resources. But really, the value comes together sometimes when you can actually have an impromptu, synchronous, asynchronous activity, which could be this event built into the actual programs. And it's the fact is that you have those assets, which are the people, and use the people again, but you can make it more scalable in a blended sort of deliverable model. Would you say that's a good statement or a bad statement?
Yeah, no, thinking about what the role of the instructors will be, because it probably changes. Their role will change depending on what activities are happening in the online space. So what I've done previously is design guides and training for the instructors, and kinds of suggestions on how to go about the moderation aspect, on you know, what aspects they can get, and the building on the reflections and the feedback and bringing all of those together. So when you meet in person, it's a different kind of skill.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Jan, you're the controller of the presentation. Is it good to perhaps flip to the next slide just to look at that sort of systematic way that we can actually look at it? Yeah, so yeah, I'll be quiet, but Jan, have you got any questions or observations?
Well, I think that actually this is a great conversation, because it becomes it gets to life. And what I see here, for example, is the skill development. We talked about relevance a lot already, and I see a lot with companies that are creating courses that actually, going back to another topic, which is the planning part of it, because Paul, you touched upon it earlier, is that so many organizations, they find themselves a tool, they find they have a course that they want to maybe transform into a blended version if they already have a course, and without any plan, start creating stuff. Is there, in your experience, Karlie, how much planning should there be done before actually starting getting to work on creating the course?
I'd say that the planning is the main. Spend a lot of time on your planning, and then you'll have less to do as you go forward. So if you plan things out and come up with a good structure, you know, it's much easier for you to change things at the planning stage than later on. So
what tools are you using for planning? Because there seem to be a lot of planning, but could I just write it up in a Word document, or do I need to make a storyboard out of it? What is the best way of doing that?
So I've used various approaches, but generally I'll come up with a high level template. So that will be a screen by screen, after the learn outcome, screen by screen, what will happen, or even in terms of in the live sessions, what happens. And so running through, and then you can use tools like Miro to map things out. So a little bit further down in the slide deck, there's an example of kind of mapping that out in more detail. So there's kind of high level block. So this is showing at different components at each stage of the journey. So the journey going from, in this example, from kind of a welcome through various sessions and then a wrap up right at the end. And then further down in more detail, it goes into specifically what happens within each of those stages. And I'd also at this point map the learning outcomes at each of these stages as well. So you can see how well the learning outcomes then map to the content. The stage after this would then be the storyboard. And that's where you go into more detail and you'd write your narrative and think about the story throughout. But at this high level stage, you'd be thinking about mapping on timings and the types of tools you'd be using at each stage, the learning outcomes, and at high level, what happens at each stage.
All right, excellent. And I'm glad to hear about the planning, because so many times it happens that people just get to work, which is perfect because people are enthusiastic. But too often what I've seen is that at the end of their, well, not even at the end of the course creation, they figure out, oh, this is actually not what I really wanted to end up with. And then they have to start again, which if you create the course yourself or if you outsource it, it's not just a loss of time. Sometimes it's also money you spent on it, having it done for you. So it can definitely be, and then it becomes this, well, not bottomless pit, but it becomes this frustration instead of enthusiasm. It turns into frustration where people go, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I have to start again. So planning is a real important part of the process and should not be underestimated indeed. And when you do it well, you end up with a very well-designed course, naturally. Talking about a bit more the creation element of courses. Are there particular tools? Because quite often what I've seen is that people think of delivery platform for a course, and creation of the content as kind of the same thing. I created some content, now I just need an LMS to deliver that from. However, I believe that the functionalities of the platform and what you created in the content as functionalities, actually, you cannot see them as two separate things. They need to work together. What is your experience with that?
I've used lots and lots of different tools. I'd say, yeah, to think about them as, you know, the platform can host, it depends on the platform, but different tools. But I think also just think about the aims of the course and what best suits those, rather than using a tool just for the sake of using a tool. Because I've seen that being done as well, and there's often just easy ways that you can create content. I wouldn't, there's not one particular solution that I would say this is the thing to use.
Fair point. Somebody else asked before this session, what is a platform? Is it just an LMS that I need? And I'll give you my 1 minute version on this. The learning platform market is very big. You can Google learning management system, learning platform. I bet you get 1,000 names on your screen. So there's too much choice. However, it's quite easy actually to categorize this. I would argue that 90% of the learning platforms that you get on that screen when you Google it are for internal staff training. And you can see this in their marketing. Look it up. They will talk about employee or staff training. Then you have other categories of learning platforms for schools or education, universities or colleges or secondary schools. That's a specific market where platforms are created for. You also have specific platforms for more niche topics. For example, the apprenticeship market. You have platforms that focus specifically on apprenticeships. You also have platforms that are specifically for training providers. Not many, I'll tell you right now. Less than a handful, I would say, that really focus on that market. So if you're a training provider and you're looking for a platform, we quite often get the comment of, yeah, there are so many. But if you really categorize it well and you really look at it for what is relevant for you as a training provider, actually, there's not that many that are designed for that. So that's one comment. The second part is, what functionality do you want to offer your learners? We talked about this earlier, and you can, that could be adaptive content that you want to create, or content that includes functionality like spaced repetition into your course design. Karlie, can you do these kind of functionalities in the content, or are there also platforms that, I know the answer to this, that do this quite well?
Yeah, I think platforms, when you're looking for things like adaptive learning or conditional release, or, you know, yeah, you want to find a platform that would then suit your needs so you can do those things. If we go back to the slide with the kind of skill development and relevance.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, here. So, so skill development here is broken down into instruction, modeling, practice, feedback. So the instruction could be a video, or it could be a piece of text. It could be some other kind of guidance. The modeling would be showing somebody how to do this really well, or seeing somebody else do it well. It could be role play. The practice could be a safe area so it could be discussion boards where people then can collaborate with each other online, and then providing the space for feedback afterwards as well. So finding something that would enable you to do that, yeah, would be a good place to start in terms of looking for something that would make it easy for your learners to practice. I think when developing any kind of blended journey, that social interaction and the collaborative element is always something to look for.
If I can interject just very quickly, Naomi, did you want to come in and ask your question that you just posed in the chat at all?
Yeah, so I was just trying to ask about maximizing engagements in terms of that blended learning. If you're looking to do some of it as pre-recorded content to maximize flexibility and accessibility for the people accessing that. It's just trying to make sure that it's kept engaging for the learners. A lot of your stuff has been about making sure there's that two-way dialogue, and in a pre-recorded session, you don't necessarily have that availability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you can do that by also, well, you can preempt what kinds of questions might come up, and so you can model answers to those, but you can also provide support. So after you've had some recorded content, then there can be a discussion forum about some of that, which then your instructors can also moderate and provide feedback on. You could also have a pre-recorded piece followed by something, kind of space for learners to then contribute, and then conditional release of some more content afterwards. So there are different ways to still try to get that, but of course it is different, which is why then building in those spaces for the live interaction would be an important part of the kind of journey as well.
Karlie, it's Paul here. Well, one way I also look at it is, so like with the pre-recorded materials, it's a resource, and really from an instructional perspective is how do you bring that back to life again, because you want to build the engagement. So I always say in answer to that, it's a resource, and then you need to think about it in the design, how you bring it to life. So the fact is, you could have like a communication center, it could be like a work-based task, set an assessment, an assignment obviously to that cohort, and bring that back to life again, so they engage, share ideas, expressions about that, but equally then say, actually that is a good idea. And what I've also found is that we say like that pre-recorded is a video, but also, I mean, my apologies, I'm gesturing with my hands, but what I am seeing as well, a lot of movement is to actually then to use video submissions back about an understanding of a task or my competencies as well. So I appreciate we talked about a bit of static materials and bringing it to life, but could you expand on that, some of your experiences there about bringing, it could be PowerPoint, PDF to life?
I think the video submissions are really good, and I've seen that used for role plays as well. So things like modeling difficult conversations or modeling negotiations and people pairing up. And in a situation where you have multiple time zones as well, that can be something to think about, of making sure you pair people up across the time zones. But that can be a really good way of getting people connected. They submit their videos, and then you can also have things like then peer feedback and ratings, and seeing the most popular ones kind of get comments, and doing that, it's a great way.
And really, from my point of view, what I was just talking about, you're creating like a community inside a particular cohort, to solve problems, work-based tasks, anything like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
So I think thinking about the number that you have per cohort is important. At least if you've got a large cohort, also thinking about how you break that down into groups so that people also feel safe in sharing those kind of things, because it can be daunting if you're thinking that I'm doing this practice role play and I've got to send this to a massive cohort. So if you have the smaller groups for some of those activities as well, that can really help.
I suppose that goes back to the very first question about culture, in some respects in organizations as well, to make them a learning organization, regardless obviously of their business function. And so really from my point of view, I'm just very conscious of time. So, I talked about community of learning, but equally we're all learning ourselves as well. So from our perspective, obviously bringing everybody together, is about that community of learning. So if people have, after this session today, questions, obviously, because this was just like a little litmus test, basically, you know, talk about it, you know, express it however you wish, but equally we'd like to build like a bit of a activity after this as well. If anyone's got any questions they want to ask or anything like that, then please feel free to that, and I can then share that with everybody, because the intention is today is to share the PowerPoint presentation that you've done. There will be a recording as well, but if I send a link so you can download this presentation in full, then look at that, have any questions about it. That's obviously from the didactic element to it from that perspective. And Jan, I think obviously what you were talking about, obviously around, we're talking about platforms, LMS, whatever it needs to be type of thing. Is there something that you can actually talk about it from a platform point of view, and how can we help the community? Jan, I don't know if you've got any points that you want to interject to that point.
Well, that was a good question, Paul. Thank you. With regards to platforms, yes. Look, we as Inmisceo, we work with a new spring. A new spring is a learning platform specifically for training providers. So that is providing training providers with all the tools to create, but also to deliver blended learning and the online parts of that. With regards to getting to know that kind of platform, actually, we have a special offer, I believe, Paul, that we created for the guests present here. With regards to that special offer, there is a trainer version, which is a perfect way to get to know that kind of platform if you are looking to start with blended learning. We can start you for £100, and we will even provide some essential branding within the platform for you, and give you 5 licenses to start your own cohort of training as well. So that's definitely an offer. It's valid till Friday. I'm sure that the email that follows this webinar will give you that in writing, so you can respond to it if you like. But that's definitely a good way to start with blended learning if you haven't started already, to get to know it. And of course, we will work with you to make sure that you create the best course possible. And if you start about creating a course, my advice would always be start transforming something you already have, because that's the easier way to get into it instead of starting something from scratch. It'll be much less frustrating for you. It'll be easier to get into it, and you can easily and quickly get to grips with what blended learning means for you.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Also, I will capture that and then share that with everybody after this. I'm just going to ask Karlie one more question, really. I'm just conscious of the time. If there's one thing that you would like to give people just before we close in a few minutes, one hint or one tip that they should take away with them, Karlie, what would that be?
The key one. Oh, yeah. One is difficult. I'd say the empathy piece. Yeah, so the making sure that you think about the learner, and the parity piece as well. So empathy and parity, the 2 pieces.
Thank you, much appreciated. And Jan, you know, equally for yourself, if you had the opportunity to speak to people here today, what one thing would you say to them that they could actually take away with them today and actually implement?
Actually, I would focus on the planning part. The planning beforehand will save you lots of time. It will save you at the end. It will make a better course product that you launch. So really plan it out before starting enthusiastically creating the course.
Okay, perfect. And one point for me is that I talked about community, and one of those sort of things, that's one of my responsibilities to the training community, is the community sort of lead. We will run these sessions once a month at the same time on a Tuesday every month for the rest of this year. But the critical thing is, we want to help you as a community. We want you to be driving impact, and we want to help, and we want to be part of your journey if we can. So thank you so much. I'll send out the communications, and hopefully we can talk again not too far in the distant future.